It's 7:30, and I'm going to call the meeting of Middleton Common Council for December 6, 2022 to order, and I'm calling this remotely because I'm supposed to quarantine. So the first item on the agenda is the roll call. Lori or Brian?
Hanairo?
Here.
Wolkes?
Here.
Looks like Ramsey is absent. Nelson?
Here.
Kuhn?
Here.
Fuzard?
Here.
Olson? Crow?
Here.
Okay, so Dan Ramsey is absent, but everyone else is there, right?
Correct.
Mostly.
Alder Fuzard is present electronically, but there are 6 members of the council physically present, meeting the 3/4 quorum requirement.
Okay, great. So the next item is the public comments. They're limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Please identify yourself, and you have 3 minutes, and Brian will keep track of the time.
Yes, Michelle Phillips, please come up to the microphone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Phillips. I'm the chair of the Middleton Arts Committee. I'm not on, am I? Oh, am I? Okay. Anyway, tonight I'm here because I want to show my support for the 0.5% of arts item that's on your agenda this evening. Our committee has been working on this for, I would say, at least 2 years. Kendra was on our committee when we worked on it. Katie has worked on it very hard, I might add. And so the reason I guess that I want to support this is because when I'm out in the community, one of the things that I hear is that the public wants more art. And we just don't have the funding to do that. And probably, as many of you know, funding has been further cut in the last few years. And this attaches funding to TIF funds that the city lends. Excuse me. And so basically, I just want to ask for your support tonight, and to help us fund some of the projects that we would like to do. It could be a statue, it could be a mural, it could be a multitude of things. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Anyone else?
No, that is all we have for submitted public comment. So we can move on to consent agenda items, Mayor.
Gurdeep, are you there?
Oh, yeah, I'm there. So is there anyone else who wants to have
nobody
any more?
else.
Okay,
else.
I'm going to close that part of the meeting, and we go to the consent agenda. So consent agenda has 3 items: Middleton Common Council minutes, audit of the bills to be paid as approved by the Finance Committee, and agreement for tax incremental finance district 3, and number 5 for the redevelopment services for 2023 for Vanderbilt and Associates. Need a motion to approve.
This is Hanairo. I'll make that motion.
This is Olson, I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Any other questions or comments or changes? Okay, if there are no questions or comments or changes, all those in favor of approval of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes, I would say, unanimously.
Yes.
So the next item is the agreements. This is the first amendment to the development agreement with Impact Armator LLC for tax incremental District 5 systems for the Trata project at 3011 Parmenter Street. So, I guess you probably already talked about in the Finance Committee. Need a motion to approve?
This is Hanairo. I'll move approval as recommended by Finance Committee.
Need a second.
This is Wokus, I'll second.
Okay, motion has been made. It has been seconded. Any questions or comments? We have talked about this project in the past, so anyway. Any questions or comments about this? Okay, if there are no questions or comments, all those in favor of the motion to approve the first amendment First Amendment to the Development Agreement with Impact Parliamentary LLC for Tax Remittal District Number 5, assistance for Trata project at 3001 Parliamentary Street. Say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So motion passes unanimously. Okay, the next is item number 2. This is again related to what we just talked about. This is the payment in lieu of the taxes agreement with Wisconsin Housing Preservation Corp for the Trata project at 3001 Parliamentary Street. Need a motion to approve.
This is an IRO. I'll move approval as recommended by Finance.
Need a second.
Mrs. Wilkes, I'll second.
Okay, any questions or comments? Instead of paying the taxes rather than TIF here, so it's pretty straightforward. Any questions or comments? Okay, if there are no questions or comments, all those in favor of the motion and payment in lieu of taxes agreement with Wisconsin Housing Preservation Corp for the Trata project at 3001 Parliamentary Street, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So now we are on to the miscellaneous. So this is the authorization of grant advisory privileges from the Middleton Area Public Lands Endowment, so-called MAPLE Fund, to the Middleton Endowment Fund Advisory Committee. So it is simply transferring the funds from MAPLE to Middleton Endowment Fund. So need a motion to approve.
This is Olson. I'll make the motion to approve the transfer.
Need a second.
Mrs. Wilkes, I'll second.
Okay, so any questions or comments? I had signed these papers, but since the City Council had approved this agreement, so City Council had to approve the change. Larry, do you want to add anything?
No.
Yeah, only thing I'd add is this is a request that came to us directly from the Madison Community Foundation, so we're bringing it on to the council per their request.
Okay.
This is an IRO. I have a couple of questions about this. So the Maple Fund Advisory Committee is described as a city committee in the materials that we got. Is that committee the same as the Maple Board? And who's on it? I looked for information on their August 17th meeting to see if it was even noticed on our city website. It seems like if it's a city committee, shouldn't it operate like other city committees?
Yeah, and I don't have any information on that this was new to me when this request came in, so I have no background on how their meetings have operated in the past.
Kelly, did you have your hand up? She might be able to.
Thank you. And then I was also curious about how much is in the fund and where is it? Where did it come from?
Could you identify yourself, please?
I'm Kelly Hilliard. I'm the sustainability coordinator, but for answering this question, it goes back before I was staff. I was appointed to be on the advisory committee for the formation of a Maple board, along with other citizens in the city. And that lasted for 6 months, and we created the mission, vision, bylaws, and the function of how Maple would run. And then the city appointed, constituted or appointed I don't think it's formally called a board, but a committee, but not a city committee. So there were no open meetings laws attached to that meeting. That was, I think in 2017. It was years ago. Shortly after that, there was the flood of 2018 and then COVID. And so Anna Biermeyer, who was on the initial advisory committee for the formation of Maple, along with Mike Davis, the former city administrator, recommended that Maple become part of Middleton Endowment in order to use Middleton Endowment's clout and community, people are aware of Middleton Endowment, and to preserve the Maple Fund under Middleton Endowment and make sure the intent stays the same and that people's donations are protected and to be used still for Maple's mission. And so this merger was a process that we worked with Madison Community Foundation, who holds the funds. And they thought it was a good way to go as well as Middleton Endowment. And so logistically, this is the process.
Okay, any more questions? So it was Penny Klein was originally behind to get this, that is the former public lands made this happen. So,
And do we know how much money is in the fund? About 30,000. Okay, thank you.
any other questions? Okay, if there are no further questions, all those in favor of the motion for the authorization of grant advisory privileges from the Middleton Area Public Lands Endowment Fund to the Middleton Endowment Advisory Committee, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. We are on to item number 2, which is the acceptance of proposed holiday and vacation changes to maintain benefit parity by Wisconsin Professional Police Association. Need a motion to approve.
This is Alder Kuhn. I'll make that motion to approve.
Okay, need a second.
This is Olson, I'll second it.
Yeah, so this is well, anyway, so maybe Larry, you want to say anything, or it is just keeping parity with the rest of the.
Yes, Mr. Mayor,
staff.
this is Administrator Gatto. Just as a point of information, this was reviewed and approved by the Personnel Committee and the Joint Finance Committee at the meeting that just occurred prior to this. Again, this is to keep parity amongst employee classifications. So with the city offering Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a holiday, this offers the same thing to the bargaining unit for the police department.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Okay. All those in favor of the motion of acceptance of proposed holiday and vacation changes to maintain benefit parity by Wisconsin Professional Police Association, local number 427, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So item number 3, this is the recommendation for approval of the selection of the Director of Parks and Recreation.
This is Alder Kuhn. I'll make that motion to approve.
All right, need a second.
This is Crow, I'll second.
Okay, this is the quickest promotion we have ever seen at Middleton City Hall.
And just a point of information for the audience and members listening, the recommendation from staff and the Personnel Committee is to select Kylie Scher, who is currently our Assistant Parks Director, to serve as the new Parks Director. With this appointment being approved tonight by council, we will have an acting Assistant Parks Director and look to backfill that position. So congratulations to Kylie. She was one of 4 finalists that we interviewed, and just her preparation and excitement for the position was very clear and apparent that she was the right candidate for the position.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Well, otherwise, all those in favor of the recommendation for approval of the selection of the Director of Parks and Recreation, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We are on to item number 4. This is the endorsement of Energy Efficiency Navigator Program eligibility criteria document.
This is Haniro. I'll move approval.
Need a second.
This is Alder Kuhn. I'll second it.
Okay, let the discussion begin.
I have some questions for Kelly, if I could,
Okay, go ahead.
for her to get to the stand. 2 things. There's other people that you're still referring this to or need to talk to about this and getting feedback from, correct? I think you mentioned the Commission on Aging and Moms that you're wanting to get additional feedback from on the guidelines for this.
Well, I would like, ideally, I'd like to proceed with, if there's no issue with the eligibility criteria, to finalize outreach and application documents and start the building assessments, where I think some of the questions that we all have can be sussed out a bit more. The Commission on Aging, we would like to involve in the process and get their feedback on just generally the program, but that meeting probably wouldn't take place until, I believe, January, I'm not sure. And tomorrow we're having a stakeholder meeting with MOM, Senior Center, Elevate, Sustain Dane, Emily Kuhn from District 4, and our project partners to further talk about the eligibility criteria and outreach, and also data from the Commonwealth Development Project in Madison. And then Elevate has agreed and would like to present about the program to Council on December 20th to be available for questions, and probably with Sustain Dane, and to help just to be here to answer the questions.
What's going to be on the agenda for the 20th?
Still to be determined, but we would have time for that presentation.
Okay, so this Commonwealth project, is that the one on the northeast side of Madison?
I believe so.
And is that they've given you all their comments and all the information that we've asked for, and feedback on how that project worked and was put together and what kind of guidelines they used?
Well, they would have all that information. I can't speak to exactly what they have, but they would be able, that project is completed. I don't know if they've done all the analysis on it. Elevate has also done projects across the country with energy efficiency. So it's not just the Madison projects that they could speak to.
Right. It was my understanding that and I think Dan had asked for this, and it's unfortunate that he's here because he is our expert on this kind of subject of rental properties and what can be done and stuff, and that he had asked to get all the information from them so that we could use that as part of our decision-making. And he will be here on the 20th, I think it would be a nice courtesy if we would defer this until the 20th and have him part of this conversation. And I'd like to make the motion to defer this until the 20th until Dan Ramsey would be here, and then we could have more information from moms and other.
Okay, need a second? Need a second.
Can I ask a question? What's your timeline on this? I know you're looking for the eligibility criteria so you can start advertising for landlords to apply to the program. And can you just explain a little bit more about the timeline on that?
Yeah, I mean, you'd need the eligibility criteria to be finalized before you sent out the application materials and the outreach. But the eligibility criteria is important because it would be great to have buy-in from all of our stakeholders and council, because it is a document that helps lay out how we select the buildings.
And it sounds like you're asking for more information from the
Well, I think
stakeholders
that's what
about
I had heard.
eligibility.
Dan was looking for how it worked before. But when are you planning on doing the outreach to get to send applications out to? That's not until January, is it?
I mean, we can wait until the 20th. I just think the longer we hold up the eligibility criteria, then it's hard to formulate the application and the
But you would have more
outreach.
information from the moms, and you could get some information from the aging, and that would help with making the decision. And I really think that it would be nice to have Dan as part of this conversation as somebody that's a landlord and understands how this process.
Now, we don't have a second to Kathy's motion, so that motion is dead. But Kelly, I have a few questions for you. So this is not final. So this can be refined and changed or not?
Yes, nothing is, completely finalized, and it can always be changed to up to a certain point.
So when I was looking at the maps, it was really hard to tell. I looked at all various colors, and looks like most of it is appears to be in District 4. And at one point, it looked like some area was so close to the lake, and I don't think it was Milton Beach Road. So, but I wondered where, because we got the Spring Tree apartments, and then we got the Harbor condos, and I just wasn't really sure exactly where those properties were. But I'm sure that you would have more information. That was one. And the second was that in your narrative, at one point you say there will be 2 to 4 units. And then a little bit later, I don't know, I have to reread it again, if it went up to even 8 units. So I just, if there's any inconsistencies, I'm sure you would take care of them.
Can you go back to the map that you're showing? I do have a question on that.
Which one?
This one.
Okay.
Now, how these maps were, did you look for places that had the apartments first and then the income? Or there's got to be little pockets, or how many properties were clustered before they were determined what the median income was? I'm kind of confused how this was the whole city done, or just these pockets?
Yes, the whole city was done, and this is based on U.S. Census Bureau data, and you can get specific data sets from the U.S. Census Bureau by census tract, and census tracts are units of, you might know the exact definition of what a census tract is. But this map only shows
population or number of people to constitute a census tract, or, because we know that throughout the city there's other areas for sure.
Right, yeah, I think that, Daphne Shu in our department prepared the map correctly. Okay, so I think one of the problems that we have is that this type of data is only available at the census tract level, so they won't drill down to a census block or a block group, which would allow you to pick up, a smaller sub area of the city. This data is only available at the tract level, and so that's why that, the piece north of the Creek corridor up to Century Avenue, it's a pretty large area.
Yeah.
That's just reflective of a census tract. And
Tract is defined as a certain number, percentage of the population, or how is that? I'm trying to get my head around
I can't say
this.
that to you off the top of my head. I don't know. I'm sorry.
So that's fine. I'm glad it's not just me.
So Larry, you would know about the census tracts. Those are by the Census Bureau. I looked at them at one point and can't really explain it, but if you do, so if you could answer Kathy's question, that would be good.
I wish I could, but I haven't researched that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I would be.
Google says census tracts are small, relatively permanent statistical subdivisions of a county or statistically equivalent entity that can be updated by local participants prior to each decennial census as part of the Census Bureau's Participant Statistical Areas Program. But to your question, it is a block of people,
And
like a number, and then that's why some
Not
are
that they're
large
all-
and some are small.
the other thing was the 5 years that they would maintain the lower costs for rent. I had heard conversations, and I don't know how it went in workforce housing, I wasn't able to go, but I thought that they were going to propose a longer period of time. What was that discussion in workforce housing like?
They brought up the idea of a LURA, which stands for a Land Use Restriction Agreement, that you could ask a building owner to sign. That could be as long as the city would designate, I believe, for keeping the rent below HUD market value price. When talking to Sustain, Dane, and Elevate about doing something like that, they said they believed it would be a huge deterrent for building owners to get involved in a project like that, and would be too restrictive. So they wanted to ask council or the city of Middleton if you'd be willing to wait for 1 year to see how the project's going and what the the application numbers are, and to learn more from the building owners and working with them to revisit that possibility after 1 year. But they felt like starting with Allura is pretty extreme for really small building owners. It might not be such a big deal for Wisconsin Housing Preservation Corps, but might be too restrictive for the 2 to 8 unit building owners.
Okay.
We have some
Any more questions?
We have questions starting with Alder Kuhn and then Alder.
Okay, go ahead, Alder Kuhn.
Thanks. So I just wanted to share with the group that Dan and I met with the group earlier. We went over some of the concepts and the map was discussed. Part of the reason that my district pops up is that it's dense and it has different socioeconomic. So that's why it's dark blue. So that's why the light blue along the lake doesn't really meet that threshold. So I offered to do a walk and talk to the early stakeholder, or the people presenting, and to Kelly, because when I've done doors, I know where the heating bills are high in my district. And so I took them just to walk past, I think it was 8 units, just to get a feel of the walking neighborhood. Now, that's not to say that that district will be accepted as a project or those people would even apply. But I wanted them to actually see it, because sometimes when you look at the map, you know, it doesn't tell the whole story. But walking around really, I feel, does help them understand what we are challenged with in the city as compared to other sites. So it was a really productive, about 45-minute meeting, and I do want to say thank you for them for coming out. It was a very cold day, and it was a great conversation. So if you'd like more information, you can always ask me later.
Thank you, Alder Kuhn. Anyone else?
Yes, we had 2 more.
Yeah, this is Katie. I have a question for Kelly regarding the sort of trial period for landlords to get involved in this. Is it going to be difficult once they promise a 5-year stay on their rent? Is it going to be hard to say, no, now you have to have it be 10 years? Is that something we can tell them going in so that they know that they're part of the initial group, that the rules might change on them? I think Kathy's a little reluctant. I don't mean to speak on your behalf, but I think I hear hesitancy to pay for all these upgrades on these apartments and then let them just go back to charging full rent.
Good point, Katie.
I'm asking Kelly, I'm
So who's the
sorry.
next?
Kelly, did you want to?
Haniro has comments too.
Well,
Okay, go ahead,
first
Elder Hanaro.
I wonder if Kelly would answer the question, or is there an answer being sought?
I guess I'd hesitate to tell a building owner that they would be on the hook for 5-year hold on rent and then change their, I wouldn't want to do that.
So right away, this first group automatically is going to be the 5-year.
That's what we,
And then after 5, or after so many years, then any new applicants would be maybe signing up for more.
As it's written now in the eligibility criteria, that's true. I mean, that could change. It could be you must have Allura, but then that might be too prohibitive and we wouldn't get applications. So as I said, it's not, set in stone at this point. I think tomorrow will be a helpful meeting to talk with Mom and the senior center about what they think and because Mom works with a lot of building buildings and clients throughout the city, so they may have a better feel for those types of things.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Other questions or comments?
because I still have another question.
Okay, go ahead, Kathy.
I'm next, and then Alder Olson.
Okay,
This is Haniro. First of all, Kelly, thank you so much for your work on this and for the revision. This is a big improvement, and it's appreciated, and just thanks for that. I attended the November 21st Workforce Housing Committee meeting, and I was very pleased to hear the chair say that he thought any effort to provide more funding to improve affordable housing in Middleton is a great thing. And he also identified, as I see in the comments, that this project will address a gap, which is right now the smaller units. And Mr. Mayor, you did observe, it does say 2 to 4 unit size targeted by the NOAA project in the Workforce Housing Committee comments, and that is different than the 2 to 8 that's referenced elsewhere, so that needs to be addressed. I had a question about how this will work. So the assessments will be done for every property that applies and meets the primary criteria, is that correct?
I believe so. I really don't. I don't foresee us getting a deluge of 40
Yeah.
applicants. So hopefully we can do assessments. Elevate did say they hope to do 10 to 12 assessments. So if we did get 20 or 30 applicants, which I can't know at this
Right,
stage,
sure.
we may have to refine the assessments down to those that fit the criteria better or fit into the targeted areas of the city. And then from those assessments, then a further selection would be made for the buildings that are chosen. And there's a lot of back and forth and intake interviews and secondary interviews with the building owner to gauge interest and how they meet some of the secondary criteria.
Well, my point was simply going to be that if there are buildings that have an assessment done, but they don't make it through the process, I would hope that that information from the assessment would be shared with the building owners so that if they want to pursue improvements on their own, they can. Also, item number 6, the rent I'm still a little confused about the rent because it refers to rent including utilities. And I just want to make sure that I understand, are we talking about the combination of what the tenant pays for rent and what the tenant pays separately for utilities? Is that the measure we're talking about? Or is it a rent that includes utilities in it?
That's a good question, and Sustain Dane has answered that question, but I cannot remember the exact wording of how they answered that.
Okay.
I have their answer in the comments of an earlier draft
Okay.
that I can share with you.
Yeah, and I'm just asking because if the tenant makes one payment to the landlord to cover rent and utilities, that's going to be harder to determine whether or not we're actually seeing a benefit to the tenant. If they're paying separately for the utilities, then we would be able to see that they're actually getting the benefit. So that's the reason I asked. But I do appreciate the work you've done on this, and I will note that originally the plan was for rents to be held for 3 years, so going up to 5 is an improvement there. And that's it, thanks.
So it does say one of the criteria is a tenant pay the gas and electric, not to the landlord, but I think that the intent was that they pay it directly to the utility so that they have it fluctuates as they save money.
Right.
My question is, as the city pays for the improvements to these properties, will those properties be evaluated and then increase tax on taxes? If the property is more valuable, if you put the solar and all the other things on, will they then increase the taxes on that house, on that property?
I don't know the answer to that. I would defer to Bill on that.
Because the landlords are receiving the benefit.
Yeah, I think that nothing in this program would change the way the assessor would look at valuing the property. So I think they would look at improvements to the property, but they also do typically look at the income and expense. And if there is a hold on the rents, that would factor into the assessments as well.
Thank you, Bill.
But wait a minute, I wanted to understand that a little bit. They would look at the improvements that were made.
Right. So as they look at valuing property, they look at several different items. They would look at comparable sales. They would look at construction costs and the conditions of the facility. But they also, for commercial properties, including rentals, will look at income and expense information. So
they factor in how much they're charging for rent into their property taxes?
yeah, so for commercial property, it's common that they will look at an income approach.
Are considered commercial?
Yes, yeah, multifamily rental projects are
Okay.
considered commercial, so an income approach is one of the approaches of assessment they would look
Okay.
at.
And it's probably the most likely to be used for a property where the business is rent. Where the only revenue to the business is rent. That's
Okay.
why the income approach
Okay.
would be used.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, so this is not final. This is, changes could be made. All those in favor of the motion for the endorsement of Energy Efficiency Navigator Program eligibility criteria document, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
I'm opposed to, I would have liked to have the more information from the other committees before we make this decision.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, I'm afraid I do too.
Well, we could have,
Okay,
I know.
so the
I know.
motion
So nay.
passes, what is the count?
Better do roll call.
Okay, let's have a roll call, please.
Nairo,
Aye.
Wolkis,
No.
Olson, or I'm sorry, Nelson,
No.
Kuhn,
Aye.
Olson.
no, don't forget Fassard.
Don't
Oh,
forget,
I'm sorry, Fazard. Can you hear me? Fazard,
Aye.
Crow.
Aye.
So motion passes 4-3.
So motion passes 4-3 or 5-2?
4-3.
4-3. Okay. All right. We are on to item number 5. This is the request from the Airport Commission for a motion to reconsider the funding for the purchase of a fuel truck for the Middleton Airport. And yes, this was on December 1st, 2022, the Airport Commission. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's the motion. That's the item. So need, I guess, some discussion, I suppose, or motion.
And I'll make a motion to deny this request. I agree with Lisa's original motion and the plans and how to fund this.
Okay, need a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, any questions or comments?
Sorry, can people hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So as a just for those who were not present, or obviously at the last airport commission, so the backstory here, and I'm sure I'm not telling folks that don't already know, is that back in March of this year, when originally we were looking at putting a fuel tank physically in the ground at the airport for the unleaded fuel, the approximate price estimate at that time was $75,000. And so what we decided is part of in conjunction with the airport commission, was that the airport enterprise fund was going to be responsible for, I believe it was $30,000, and that the city was going to be responsible for $45,000. And I think what Chair Halleck has asked for us to reconsider is that it is now we'll use that same percentage in terms of basically a 60-40 split, with 60% coming from the city, 40% coming from the airport, towards the purchase of a fuel truck. And now, which has been priced at approximately $45,000. I think most folks anticipated wouldn't go over 50. And so it would be approximately, if my maths are correct, about 30,000 from the city and about 20,000 from the airport enterprise fund, the 30K coming from TID 3. So I think what Chair Halleck was merely looking for is to return the proportionality of the original motion that was passed towards the purchase of this fuel truck.
Thank you, Elder Luke. Any further questions or comments?
I do want to make a comment, is that when this was discussed back in March, the airport was willing to pay, they were going to pay $30,000, and I think that would be nice. We have the benefit of a survey of our citizens that said they would like the airport to be more self-sustaining. And the fact that we're using TIF on a truck, and we're asking for those funds to be returned to us when the truck is sold, I think that's the only thing that's getting me past even giving the $15,000. So that's how I see this.
And
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Any other questions or comments?
yes, this is Lisa. I'd like to comment as well. I think the original council action from November 15th is reasonable. In addition to the survey that Alder Olson just mentioned, the city does have an obligation as part of our assurances, assurance number 24, as a recipient of federal funds under the Airport Improvement Program, we're obligated to make the airport as self-sustaining as possible. And I always keep this assurance top of mind when I'm doing work related to the airport. It's also strategy 6 in the transportation chapter of our comp plan. It says right there that one of the things we should do in continuing to plan for and operate the airport is to maximize financial self-sufficiency. At the meeting of the Airport Commission, and I don't believe Alder Fassard was there, but at the meeting of the Airport Commission, when this truck purchase came up, we discussed the $45,000 amount. We discussed the need for an inspection with a successful conclusion to it. And we also discussed the need for council to be aware that there would be some continuing maintenance costs for this truck, and that would be borne by the Airport Enterprise Fund. What we did not discuss was how to break down that $45,000 or what to do when the truck is sold, as we think it eventually will be. So when I made the motion to council on November 15th, I went with the $30,000 that council had already committed from the Airport Enterprise Fund, which is city money. I hear all the time on the commission meetings, the city and the airport, the city and the airport. Well, the city owns the airport, so this is all city money, but we have a fund whose purpose is to help fund airport activities. So since council had already committed the $30,000, and since the budget for the Airport Enterprise Fund is right now in really good shape for this year, we have $95,000 unspent in capital improvement projects. So it seemed to me like a good way to demonstrate self-sufficiency by having the original $30,000 from that was earmarked from the Airport Enterprise Fund, and the remainder, in this case $15,000, coming from TID 3. Now, the one change that I think we do need to consider is the fact that now the estimate is $50,000 instead of $45,000 because that initial inspection did not go as planned. So there are some minor repairs, I'm told they're minor, that may need to be made, and the request was to bump it up to $50,000. I could support having $20,000 come from TID 3 and the original $30,000 come from the Airport Enterprise Fund. I don't think I would be comfortable going above $50,000 for this particular project because we had another option that was the most expensive option, but life cycle wise probably would be better than continuing to sink money into a truck if we wind up paying more than $50,000 for it. And we could discuss that at another time. But I just wanted to make it clear that, I see this as an opportunity by not having TID 3 shoulder the bulk of the expense, by having the Airport Enterprise Fund do it. I think it's a demonstration of our commitment to making sure the airport is as self-sustaining as possible.
Thank you, Alder Lisa. Any other questions or comments?
Is my question, the part about adding the additional $5,000, is that the potential action, number 6, item number 6?
Yeah, I guess, Larry, we could do that, right?
That could be a separate motion made by the council. It was added as anticipation of if you were going to support the rescinding of the previous motion, then you'd need a second action item to come back and make a change. Since it, depending on how this motion that's on the floor is acted upon, you would have the opportunity to make a modification with that second agenda item.
I agree, because item 6 is partially sources of funding and also total authorized expenditure. So even if the council voted to, in essence, deny reconsideration of the prior motion from November 15, item 6 would still cover potentially total authorized expenditure for the purchase of a truck.
That's where we could cover that.
Okay, thank you, Larry. So any other questions or comments? Otherwise, all those in favor of the
Wait,
motion?
We have more questions.
More questions, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
okay, I apologize. Sorry, go ahead.
This is Katie, and I think this question is for Lisa, but maybe someone else. I like your explanation of how this could get paid for either way. Given that the airport commission, what's it? The
Airport
fund?
Enterprise Fund.
Enterprise Fund is so healthy, why wouldn't the price overage come from that instead of bumping up the TIF portion?
It could come from that. I mean, really, the full $75,000 that in March was estimated for the cost of just the design, engineering, and I don't think the construction of the tank was included, but that $75,000 could have been covered by the Airport Enterprise Fund. I do know there are projects coming up in the future, capital projects, for which money will be needed. So, I mean, it's a $5,000 difference. I could go either way. I would support either one. I can tell you, based on the conversation at the Airport Commission meeting, the strong preference would be for TID 3 to pick up that $5,000.
The additional $5,000 for repairs, that wasn't questioned whether that was, the value was still there for the truck. They thought that the $5,000 to make the repairs was worth it for this truck?
They did not have an estimate of $5,000 for the repairs. They just changed the estimate from $45,000 up to $50,000. I asked the point, and it didn't get any traction, but in my mind, when I made the proposal, and when the Airport Commission talked about the need for an inspection and a successful conclusion to that inspection, in my mind, we've reached the point where we've had the inspection and it wasn't a successful conclusion. I didn't see it as an iterative thing where if it didn't pass, we'd try again, make some changes and try again. But the rest of the Airport Commission was not in line with my thinking on
Am
that.
I understanding this correctly, is that they're asking for additional $5,000 to purchase a truck, not knowing if it needs repairs, but they just want to have a buffer?
They would not bring it out here unless it passes the inspection. So, but somebody needs to make the changes to the truck in order to deal with a coolant leak.
Yeah, just a point of information. So yes, there has been an inspection done. The two issues that need to be resolved, which we don't have prices back on what that cost yet, are a coolant leak in the engine and then an issue with the injector pump. So once we have the cost to replace that, which again, in the scale of a truck that's 1985 truck, those are pretty reasonable expenses. Once we have more information on what the repair cost would be, we can provide that. But our rough estimate at this stage in the game was no more than an additional $5,000.
Any other questions or comments? I don't really have any problem with having 30,000 coming from the enterprise fund and 20,000, well, going up to 50,000 because, and 20,000 coming from the TIP money. And the reason is that this unleaded gasoline has become a very important issue, and I think we said we are going to do it, and I think it is really important that we did.
Mayor Barr, right now, we're just denying the motion to reconsider in the next agenda.
Yep.
item. We'll discuss it.
Yep. Okay, so if there are no questions or comments, all those in favor of the motion.
Ari,
No
I'm
comment.
sorry,
deny the
I
request.
have another,
All those in
Nope.
Oh, we still have a
Mr. Mayor,
comment.
motion to deny the request for the airport commission.
Mr. Mayor, just hold on one second.
Motion to reconsider the funding for the purchase of a fuel truck for the Middleton Airport. Say aye. We are denying the request.
Mr. Mayor, we need to pause for 1 second. There is a question from a council member. Just Kathy, go ahead and ask your
Pardon
question.
me?
We need to pause for 1
Motion
second.
is
There's a
to deny
question.
the request for the airport commission for the motion to reconsider the funding for the purchase of the fuel truck for the Middleton Airport.
Mr. Mayor, we need to pause for 1 second. There's a question from a council member.
I have a question. This is Katie, and is Mark Opitz the staff person on airport?
He is an assistant. He helps assist the commission in addition to myself.
Oh, you also, okay. Thank you, Brian. I'm sorry. As staff, do you have a recommendation or a preference on how this is broken down?
I mean, really, it's a policy question from the council, not to duck your question, but in terms of how you want to fund it, it's up to you. As Alder Hanero mentioned, it's all city money, so however you want to divide that up
slice
makes
it.
sense. Mhm.
Okay. I mean, I do like to hear from the people who make the recommendations, so, okay. We'll slice it up in the next item, right?
Okay, any other, so did we vote on this one?
Not yet. Just the question can now be called.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion deny the request for from the Airport Commission for a motion to reconsider the funding for the purchase of a fuel truck for the Middleton Airport, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 6-1. Okay, we are on to item number 6. This is the potential action regarding sources of funding and total authorized expenditure for the purchase of a fuel truck for the Middleton Airport. And now we can make any changes. Go ahead. Who is going to make a...
Well, before that, I've been listening, and are we ready to say that it's appropriate to amend the total expenditure to $50,000, or should it wait for 2 weeks?
I think I would like the authorization at this moment, so, if we get the cost back and it's reasonable for us to proceed, that we have the ability to do that rather than waiting 2 additional weeks.
Okay.
Because that's going to impact, transportation time back here and all that.
Okay, so the motion should be up to 50,000. If it's less, that's great.
And we also designate
Okay.
how we want that split between TIF and the Airport Enterprise Fund.
Okay, so
Yep. Okay, so who is ready to make that motion?
I'll make a motion. All right, I'm going to make a motion to increase the funding to pay for the fuel truck, referencing the action from November 15th, please, Brian and Bill, to increase the amount of funding available for the purchase of a fuel truck to no greater than $50,000, with the amount to come first $30,000 from the Airport Enterprise Fund, and then up to $20,000 from TID 3, with all other conditions still in effect.
Okay, need a second.
I will second that.
Okay, any questions or comments now? I think this motion makes sense that the cost may go up to 50, and I think 30-20 makes sense too. So, 60-40 the other way. Okay, any questions or comments?
This is Olson. I have a comment. I kind of, if we're talking they should be self-sufficient, I would not have a problem keeping with our original 15,000 and going 35, even though it may not set very well. If they have the funds to do it, I think that would not be inappropriate. To ask them to already authorize 15.
Okay.
Those
Thank
funds.
you, Alan Olson. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, we have comments from Alder Fuzard.
Okay, Alan Fuzard, go ahead, please.
My apologies, but I would just say that the enterprise funds have been typically designated for other projects, and so I want us to be very cautious to look at this as just some untapped pool of money that's otherwise unallocated. I think, given that we passed a motion originally with a certain set of funding criteria that we then rescinded, I think that it's perfectly reasonable for us to not ask the enterprise fund to dip even further into their coffers.
Could you let us know what those projects are that there's? We heard what, 95,000 in the fund, and how that is earmarked. What's earmarked?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but I do know that there are like some pavement and resealing and other things that are part of the long-term vision of the airport itself. And that would be a good question for like Rich Morey, and we could absolutely bring that back to a future council meeting.
Just a point of information, one of the projects that the Airport Commission is working on now with the Bureau of Aeronautics would be a kind of rehabilitation of the existing runway as it sits today. There would be some city contribution in order to get a match from the BOA. So that's just one
Enterprise fund contract.
Right, yeah.
And not knowing.
That be on the 95% federal, 5% city basis?
Yeah, I don't have the percentage breakdown in front of me, but yep.
That's normally what it is. So I'm just wondering, since this is not a capital cost, but a enhanced maintenance cost, whether it would be subject to the 95-5 funding formula. I don't know.
We have a question from Alder Kuhn.
Any other questions or comments? There are others.
I would like to say that I'd like to say thank you to Luke for giving his insights. I really appreciate the concern that's been brought forth on the finance perspective and being to the number line. I voted in the last round because I listened to the arguments and I was willing to go with you on this. However, to come back and then say they should pay more when they have projects planned for that money, I think it's time to meet in the middle. So I second Alder Fuzard's comments and ask that the city considers that $5,000 source.
I can go with
So,
the first dollars when it's sold, 20,000 would come back to TIF. The first 20,000 of the sale would come back to TIF, not just 15,000. So
Yes, that's a good amendment, because I did say that all other conditions would apply, but I believe that it specified 15,000 for TID, so, yeah. I'm comfortable with that change.
That's good.
That's a good clarification.
okay, so the original motion already had 30,000 coming from the enterprise fund and 20,000 from the city. So there's what is the change?
up to 20,000 from the city.
It's
Up to 20,000.
yeah, up
So
to
it's already the original motion. So
What's
Brian or
changing,
Bill?
Gurdeep, is if and when the truck is sold, where are the proceeds allocated? Because the former
okay, so-
motion had the first 15,000 to TID, and now we're raising TID to 20, and we haven't made a motion yet regarding the disposition of that future sale proceeds.
When we made that first motion, we kind of knew it was 45,000, so now it's up to 50, but the first 30 would be paid from the enterprise fund and up to 20,000 from the.
Yes.
TIF. Okay.
Right.
And I was going to ask Brian or Bill if they could read back.
Yeah, so the motion I have is motion to increase funding to $50,000 at a not to exceed number. This is based upon the November 15th motion, with the first $30,000 coming from the Airport Enterprise Fund and up to $20,000 for the balance coming from TID number 3. There was a potential amendment that was discussed but not formally seconded, where the first $20,000 of the vehicle sale proceeds would return to TID number 3.
Just to add, and I also had said that all the other conditions would still apply from November 15th. So I guess after that, you could say with the exception that the return of 15,000 to TID 3 is now the return of 20,000 to TID 3.
Would you like
Or
to amend the
whatever.
motion?
Up to 20,000,
Yeah, whatever.
Up to
whatever the
right.
amount.
okay, so
that's-
Nero, you're amending the motion then?
So I'm
Is
amending,
that-
I'm amending my motion then.
Okay, and the second is okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so any further questions or comments now? Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, all those in favor of the motion for the funding of the authorized expenditure for the purchase of fuel truck for the Middleton Airport, the motion as made by Elder Nero and seconded, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. We are on to the ordinances, and this is the first reading. Final action may be taken upon approval of the motion to suspend the rules under section 1.07 Middleton General Ordinances. Item number 1 is the General Ordinance 2022-01, an ordinance to authorize a remote appearance for quorum purposes. So I think we had, well, Larry, you want to take it? I guess it's best to defer it or send it to Ellen and to the other committees.
Well, yeah, this ordinance was drafted by me a long time ago, and it's coming back because of the termination of the COVID-19 emergency. And as I had indicated to Gurdeep earlier today, this is an ordinance which I feel deserves to be reviewed by a committee before it comes to the council, because there are other ways that might be other options for how something like this might be done, or perhaps the committee concludes it's not ready for prime time at all. So, you know, I would recommend that you refer it to the License and Ordinance Committee, since they're in charge of this kind of thing.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I will make a motion that we refer it to LNO.
This
Okay,
is
need a second?
Nelson, I'll second.
Okay, any further questions or comments?
I do have a comment. How do we want to handle, you know, if there's people that would like to take off for the winter for 4 or 5 months, is that something that extended remote dial-in is, how do people feel about this? I don't know.
Well, I think
Planned, or is it an occasional?
this isn't the only municipality where things like that happen. And there are certainly some communities, particularly small boards in rural areas, where they just don't have physical meetings when people are snowbirding. I'm not saying that's a good thing to do. I'm only saying this is an existing practice. And I think before the council votes on this, you ought to think about that deeply on what you'd like to do. Because this isn't just for the council, it's for the committees too. It's written very broadly, intentionally. And, you know, there are a variety of things you might do that are not in this ordinance now. But that's an absolutely terrific question.
If we weren't going to refer this to LNO and we're going to vote on it tonight, I would have voted to reject the ordinance, just because I do feel, no offense to Alder Fassard and the mayor, but I do feel for council, we need to be in the same room. And Alder Ramsey said previously when we talked about this that we all knew what we were signing up for when we ran for office. And I feel the expectation should be that for council meetings, everyone should be here, because it is disruptive to, you know, have audio problems and things like that. However, I do feel for the committees, commissions, and boards, they should have the ability to choose for themselves what works for their members. And so I would like, I think we might want to add a time frame for LNO to come back to us with a suggestion, and I would hope that LNO would make it so that one thing can apply to council, but the committees, commissions, and boards would have some more flexibility.
And just a point, sorry, don't want to cut you
Well,
off.
I'm with you. I guess, yeah, if you see my notes and my questions to Larry, I mean, you know, and Larry agrees that if this ordinance, well, I had those 6 questions, you probably all saw those, and you know, so you usually don't need anybody. There could be empty city council chamber there. So, and so I don't think this ordinance as it is, it should go anywhere. So whatever you guys want to do, I'm okay with that. So if you want to reject it, that's fine. So I don't have any problem at all. So.
Alder Nelson, did you have a question?
I think Brian had a comment before mine.
Sorry, just I was going to make a point of information. And one of the other policy questions that the council could weigh in on is you could establish, similar to what Alder Hanero was getting at, you could establish what committees, commissions you felt absolutely needed to meet in person. So council being the obvious one, Personnel committee also likely, finance committee also likely. Typically, other communities have plan commission as an example being one that more often than not meets in person because of just the interaction between the applicants, staff, and the commission members, with the possibility of maybe remoting in if you had a developer coming in from Denver or Chicago or whatever. But the body itself would meet in person. You could then establish a separate category for other kind of more policy advisory bodies where it's not as necessary for them to be physically in person. And once the hybrid technology is in place, that gives them that option. Where I was going to go with my point of information is in terms of the question of when should this get referred back to the city council. Our updated estimate from IT department is that we might have this technology installed by end of January, like 23rd of January, thereabouts. So if we could get a recommendation back from LNO before the end of January to allow the council then to pick up this discussion again early February would be probably appreciated.
No, I forgot my point. Hold
Sorry.
on.
It's there.
I do agree that there are definitely council and some of the bigger committees. We should at least have a physical quorum, but I do believe we should also embrace technology and understand that we get more participation with committees if we have that availability to Zoom in or do the hybrid meeting. That's all.
June?
First, I'd like to say that that's a really good point, especially embracing the technology, especially for someone like Luke who might be traveling tonight or has children issues or whatever the reason. Can we separate the discussion out for, say, council or plus that 3 or 4 committees and then have a second policy for the rest of them? Because
That's going to be my intention, taking it to LNO. I don't know about Kendra, but yeah, and Luke.
Right.
That I would like to be able to separate some of this out.
So, Larry, you want to provide your input? So then we are differentiating the committees. Anyway, I will let you provide your input here.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide any input anybody wants. As I said to you, this was intentionally drafted to make meetings to allow for maximum flexibility in holding meetings. That's all it was. And if that's not the approach that the council ultimately and LNO decide they want to take, that's fine. It was, you have to write something. And so I started from wide open. And if we want to go to a middle ground or not to adopt this ordinance at all, that's fine. Not a problem. But but that's why I wrote it way back in April. So
Yeah, well, I guess the pandemic was still an issue there. Now it is dwindling or going away. And, I did ask you if there's any city or any village or, well, your answer is, as far as you know, none. And, state statutes are for a reason. I mean, they are not just, they shouldn't be taken, easily just to go and amend it. So I think, from all what I have said, you can see I'm not in favor of it. People can still participate in it, like I can, as long as the physical quorum is there. So, many of us have done in the past as well. So, in any case, maybe, LNO and the other committees can, I would say, we should get input from the other committees as well, what they're thinking of, besides LNO as well. So, Plan Commission, what do they think? Public Works is a very important committee, as is also PRFC. So it's good to know what they think of it, So, or maybe we could send it to them after LNO has come up with something that what they think of it. But before we really vote on it, finally, it should be really looked at by other committees. Any other questions or comments? Okay, otherwise, are those in favor of the motion to...
Council, I mean, when we're elected to we have resident requirements to be within your district and stuff, and I think that that's an important distinction. And there are other committees that, like when the Plan Commission, they do make final rulings, and so I think it might be, definitely, we have to have better technology to even get this off the ground.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Clearly, there's a
Kathy, so-
need for the technology, given that the mayor is isolating. It's not over, right? It's,
Yeah.
here are examples. We've got
Yeah,
two people
exactly. You're right, yeah.
electronically here. So we'll work on it.
Okay, so, all right, any other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to send this item number 1 under the ordinance, short ordinance 2022-01 to LNO and other committees, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we are on to the recommendations and proposal. This is the recommendation of 0.5% for arts program for taxing rental financing districts. Item number 1.
This is Nelson. I would move approval.
Need a second.
Olson, I will second.
Okay, any questions or comments now?
I have one question I forgot to ask about the type of art that it is.
Oh, in the packet, there's some,
Is this going to be for permanent art? I know there, or it has to be permanent installed art.
Yes, and if I had to do this over again, I would include a definition, because there are 4 different types of public art that are included in the public art master plan, and one of those types is temporary. That would not be allowed, because the TIF statute does not allow you to spend dollars on a temporary event or a temporary installation.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Abby.
The other,
Any,
the other question, which was discussed at finance, is the council adopting or moving adoption of option 1 or option 2 on page 4?
Yes, I was going to ask Alder Nelson if she'd like to amend her.
yeah, I would like to amend my motion to add that I would move that we approve option 1, that puts the 0.5% in as a line item when figuring out the tax increment, so that it's not just up to the developer and there's no real way to follow up.
okay, and this is the TIF money only, so. Okay, and the second, Kendra, is it okay with you?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Okay, any other further questions or comments? We are voting for option 1. Okay, all those in favor of the recommendation for a 0.5%.
Wait, pause.
I do have one question. Is there any criteria that the art project needs to be within a specific TIF district?
Yes. So the funds that would come out of TIF District 5 would have to be spent somewhere else within TIF
Within
District
5.
5, and the same goes for TIF District 3. And one of the things that I should mention is that this is a recommendation on the concept this evening to go with option number 1. But I think that the implementation tool that I would need to work on and bring back to the Common Council would be an amendment to the TIF budget, which I think would be done by resolution of the council. And at that time, we would also be able to bring back details on the last 3 years of approved TIF incentives in each of the districts, and then what that 0.5% of those amounts would be, maybe looking at an average over the 3 years, or maybe the council would prefer to go with the 2022 numbers. But we'll bring all that information forward to you, so you'll have that to consider.
Okay, thank you, Abby. Any other questions or comments? Any other questions or comments? Okay, otherwise, all those in favor of the motion or the recommendation for a 0.5% for arts program for taxing rental financing districts, and this is option number 1, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. we are on to the resolution. This is a resolution 2022-65. This is the resolution declaring the end of the public emergency related to COVID-19. Need a motion to approve.
This is Alder Kuhn. I'll make that motion.
Need a second.
This is Crow, I'll second.
Okay, any questions or comments?
I have a question. Can we get a definition
go ahead.
on the normal quorum requirements for all governmental meetings? Does that require in person, as it states in our current charter ordinance about normal quorum?
Well, the normal rule for a quorum is a majority. For the Common Council, it's 2/3. And for the council, it is fairly clear, although I acknowledge there are some who might disagree with my interpretation, that the 2/3 means physical attendance. For committees, it says less. But if I were asked to give an opinion at a meeting, if you had one member of a committee present and 4 others present only by electronic means, I would say that's an illegally convened meeting, because my interpretation is that there is a physical presence requirement for committees just the same as there is for the Common Council. So
But a committee isn't a government, are they considered a governmental meeting?
absolutely.
Okay.
They are governmental bodies.
Okay,
This would be all committees, subcommittees, special committees,
okay,
ad hoc committees.
okay.
They are all governmental bodies.
So, Larry, could we say that this would be applicable only after January 1st?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand you,
Well,
sir.
I think he's
Could this be applicable, all those committee meetings after January 1st, so that the staff has time to inform all the members?
Certainly, if you wanted to add an effective date to the resolution, that would be fine.
And that's what I was going to suggest. I think it's more than adding an effective date. We have to change the be it further resolved clause, because it says that from the date of enactment of this resolution and moving forward, the normal quorum requirements for all governmental meetings in the city of Middleton shall apply. I think it should say, be it further resolved that effective February 1st or March 1st, depending on how long L&O might need to come back to us, I'd feel comfortable if we were to change that clause.
I would even be more comfortable than we have the hybrid technology in place before anything happens. If
Should we
Ellen
defer
is
this?
real snappy, what?
Do we need to defer this until we have the hybrid technology?
I don't know.
I don't think we want to defer it, but we can see that when it would be applicable. I think we can say February 1st. First plan was to have a January 1st, but that gives staff enough time, but it could be February 1st. 33% of the committees are already meeting in person. So there is only, the rest are not, so.
Can I ask, Brian, what is the inconvenience of not passing this tonight?
You mean deferring it to a future meeting?
Yeah.
I mean, it can be added to the meeting on December 20th. We could move it to whenever the council wants to talk about it. I think the question about if you wanted to have an enactment date rather than February 1st, I'd suggest March 1st, just because, again, as we found with this, getting technology in and all of that, it may take us, the estimate we have now is that we'll have it by the end of January. That could change depending on what things happen, and then there may need to be bugs worked out with the system once we actually physically have it in the building. So just to give us that buffer, I'd recommend March 1.
Yeah, I agree. Do we have to change any motion?
Do you want to?
Lisa, did you say a date?
Motion? I just suggested it. I didn't make the motion.
Emily did.
I made the motion, I did not include a date, but I can amend to it if we can agree to one. I'm fine with February or March. Probably March because of the technology and testing time, so March 1st. Well, I will amend it to the March 1st.
I can agree with that.
Okay, all right.
And I-
Any other further question or comments?
And I understand that that will require a minor revision to the last be it further resolved clause to put that date right in there.
Okay, and you will take care of that?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor of the resolution 2022-65 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. We are on to resolution item number 2, with the resolution 2022-69, approving the issuance of tax incremental revenue bond for the Trata project at 3001 Parmenter Street. Need a motion to approve.
This is Haniro. I move approval as recommended by the Finance Committee.
Need a second.
This is Wilkus, I'll second.
Okay. So my question is that how can they get this loan at 1.5% interest? Not my problem, but Bill, can they get that loan at that low interest?
Yes, Mayor, I can address that. So the interest rate on TIF bonds is always an item that's negotiated, and one of the items that's considered is the financial need for the project. I can also add that as part of those negotiations, it was indicated that this project was being financed internally by Impact 7 rather than going to a bank to seek a private securitization of the TIF bond. So they had the flexibility to apply an interest rate, and that was one of the points of negotiation. We do have some TIF bonds where we don't pay any interest, and that's also part of the negotiation.
Okay, all right. Any further questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution 2022-69 approving the issuance of a tax incremental revenue bond for the Trata project at 3001 Parmenter Street, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We are on to item number 3, which is the resolution 2022-70 for adoption of a City of Middleton workplace bullying policy by the City of Middleton. Need a motion to approve.
This is Olson. I'll move approval as recommended by personnel. There were a few edits to the policy.
This is Alder Kuhn. I'll second that.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Were those major edits or something simple?
Relatively minor clarification edits.
Okay, all right. Any further questions or comments? Otherwise, all those in favor of the resolution 2022-70 for adoption of a City of Middleton workplace bullying policy, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Item number 4, big one here, resolution 2022-71. Establishing 2023 wages and salaries for non-represented employees, giving Brian a big raise here. Need a motion to approve.
This is Alder Kuhn. I'll make that motion to approve.
Need a second.
This is Haniro. I'll second.
Okay, any questions or comments? I think it has been worked out pretty well. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, all those in favor of the resolution 2022-71, establishing 2023 wages and salaries for non-represented employees, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We are on to item number 5, which is the resolution 2022-72, authorizing the establishment of the 2023 Emergency Medical Services Fee Schedule. Need a motion to approve.
This is Alder Kuhn. I'll make that motion to approve.
This is Crow.
Need a second.
This is Crow. I'll second.
Any questions or comments?
This is Alder Kuhn. I wanted to say that I really appreciated the EMS Chief Steve Wunsch. His comments on Jack Stout's perspective on emergency services and the economic perspective, and I appreciate that even though there were increases, it was small and staying within the range going to 60%. So I thank him for his time.
Yeah, I would say our EMS is doing a great job. One of the big differences when you compare with the other cities that when they don't transport, our is $500 fee, but I guess I can live with it. So others is varies as you have looked at the table. So any further questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution approving the resolution 2022-72, authorizing the establishment of the 2023 emergency medical services fee schedule, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We are on to item number 6. This is the resolution 2022-73 recommending approval of the urban services area amendment in the city of Middleton for the acre farm development. In the motion to approve.
This is Haniro. I'll move approval.
Need a second.
This is Wokus, I'll second.
Yeah, so this is our 124 or 125 acre development, and they need these services, otherwise you can't do much about it. So any questions or comments? Otherwise, all those in favor of the resolution 2022-73 recommending approval of the urban services area amendment to the city of Middleton for the acre farm development, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. These are the appointments to various city committees. One is the aging, so Bonnie will serve only the remaining time of the Jolene Olson, and the second is Gwen Wakely. He's highly qualified, and he will serve the remaining part of the person who left and went to Arizona. Need a motion to approve.
This is Wokus, I'll make the motion to approve.
This is Nelson, I'll
Okay.
second.
Is that for both of them?
I thought it was just the first.
Just the first one? Okay.
Oh,
I couldn't tell.
Just to be clear.
Okay, any questions or comments?
were we moving on one or both of these appointments?
Whatever you want. So if you want to do it separately, that's fine. Otherwise, if you have any questions, want to do it separately, that's fine too.
I have no problem taking them together. I'll make the motion to approve them both.
I'll second.
Okay, any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve the committee appointments, that's number 1 and 2, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Need a motion to go into closed session.
Olson, I'll make the motion to go into closed session.
Need a second.
Wokus, I'll second.
All those in favor of the motion to go into closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so let's
And just I'm just going to read the legal caption for the reason for the closed session. So it's a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to section 19.851E Wisconsin statutes for deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session. Discussion of the acquisition of Latitude Graphics property at 2610 Parmenter Street.
well, this.
Good to go.
Okay, so we are now
Okay.
back in open session.
Okay, we are in the open session, and now we need a motion to, well, Abby or Larry, you want to formulate a motion for elders to make?
It would be a motion to extend the, what is the date?
March 20th.
320.
No,
March
no.
20th.
What is the date, a date for? It's not a date
Isn't
for
it the- what's
closing.
it called?
I think it's the
Extend the purchase date?
investigation period and closing. I'll check.
Yeah, let's make 100% sure.
The closing date in the current agreement is 12/20, and so we would need to extend the investigation period to, I guess it would be 3/19 with the closing date anticipated for 3/20 of 23.
Bill, do you want to, is that okay, or?
Yeah, I have the agreement it up, and it refers to, in the original agreement, an investigation period of 120 days to evaluate the property. And so I think we're seeking an extension to the investigation period with a closing date of March 20th.
Okay, so is somebody going to make that motion now then?
I will. This is Katie. I would like to move that we extend the investigation period on this property to March 19, 2023, with a closing date of March 20, 2023.
Larry, does that sound okay?
Yes.
I will second
Okay,
that.
need a second.
This is Olson, I'll second that motion.
Okay, any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Well, I need a motion to adjourn. I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. You are all awesome, and wish you all a happy holiday. So need a motion to adjourn.
This is Wilkes. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
This is Alder Kuhn, I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to adjourn say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So we are adjourned. And